the ultimate bass pickup. And are most pickup demos crap? Let's find out. Metal Bass Monday, Pickup Edition. Welcome back once again, and a couple updates. Now that a lot of the shipping restrictions have been lifted and things can be free-flowing again, lots of new demo stuff coming in, finally. So we have that to look forward to. It looks like pretty soon I'll be getting the new Getty DI 2112 from Tech 21 in. That'll be a great one. And AMT, I'm going to be in a discussion with this week about sending me a big amount of gear to demonstrate for you guys on both bass and guitar. They've got some really cool stuff that isn't getting a lot of exposure in the States. And I'm going to be pretty excited about bringing that to you. Full disclosure, I'm an AMT artist, but as we've talked about in other Metal Bass Monday episodes, I don't endorse or push things that I don't use or I don't like, and I'm always upfront and honest about it. So AMT gear is definitely underappreciated on this side of the sea, so it'll be cool to bring that out and show what kind of options they might have. As you know, I use the Virgin cab on my board, which I showed last week, and it's just an awesome unit. So exciting gear stuff coming up. It's going to be very cool. I'm glad stuff's finally starting to be able to get shipped out, and we're going to get into it. Is there one video that you can finally watch, one pickup demo that's going to get you the holy grail bass pickup? The one that you've been looking for, the perfect, the tone, what you've been searching for, that final gear demo that's going to come out and it's going to show you that final sound that you've been searching for all this time, and you're going to know right away, and you're going to be able to buy it, you're going to get that sound? No. Now, I know what you're probably saying. Oh, Rodney, did you clickbait me into this? No, I didn't. Actually, what I'm going to do is dispel a couple of myths, and I'm going to talk about pickup demos in general and how to get through all the garbage that's out there and why a lot of it's just not effective and why a lot of the pickup demos just aren't going to serve you very well. Let's look at how you need to look at a pickup demo to find out how it's really going to work for you. And you're never really going to get the sound that you hear there. Never. It's not going to happen. But your buddy Rodney's going to save you a ton of money, a ton of time, and get you to the end result faster. So are you going to find your holy grail pickup? Yes, but not the way you think. So let's figure out how you need to be approaching these demos and how to get to what you want as quick as possible. So stick with me here. We are going to go down a path, and by the end of it, you're going to have a much better sense of how to zero in on getting just what you want. I'm going to save you time. I'm going to save you a lot of money. So let's get to it. Now, what is the problem with most of these videos? And I'm going to have a little rant here too about some things I've had to deal with in comment sections about my pickup demos. And I'm also going to call myself out here. The biggest problem that you're going to deal with pickup demos, and I'm going to prove this with a couple demonstrations here in a minute, is that none of it is going to be able to be replicated on your end. And two, if you only see one pickup in a video, it's basically going to be useless to you. What? But I see those all the time, and they sound so great. What could be wrong? Well, the problem is there's so many variables going on in that video that are different from anything that's going to be in your situation that it's impossible to decipher it unless there's a comparison. If you're only hearing one pickup, the biggest problem is there are so many variables, the biggest one being your instrument, that aren't going to be able to be replicated. It's not your guitar set up the way you play it with the strings that you have. Even guitars inside of the same series or same model, like if you bought a Riot bass like one of the ones I have from Schecter and you have one, I can guarantee ours sounds slightly different. You're not going to get exactly what you hear inside of the single pickup demo. What you really need to do is always try and go for comparisons with something you hear that's familiar. That's the one that's going to give you at least some point of reference and start being able to find out for yourself, is this going to give me the things I'm looking for? Example, if you say have a certain pickup and it sounds dark or it sounds a little muddy in your bass and you're looking for something to brighten it up, that type of thing, or give it some upper mids or a little bit more treble, what you need to do is see a versus demo or a comparison with a pickup you're already familiar with. If you're hearing a pickup in isolation, you have no idea how it's actually going to sound in your instrument. And believe me when I say this, I'm a pickup fanatic. And I've done this over and over, and it took me years to get this through my head, that just because it sounded great in a demo didn't mean that that's what at all the sound I was going to get. I would get confused and frustrated constantly by this. Not only that, but a lot of the guys who demo things, they do it because they're good at it. And that's not, a slam on them. They're good at dialing in a sound. And if you don't have the same level of ability or know how they get their end result, you're not going to get that same sound and you're going to wind up frustrated. If you look, you'll see that comment a lot, especially on some of the bigger names that demo gear. You'll see in the comments section, it always sounds the same. Whenever this guy demos an amp, it sounds the same. It's because they have a certain way of dialing it in and an ear, and that's true. If you have a certain style or a sound, you can usually get it out of almost any piece of gear. So the only way to get a real idea of what's going on is to hear a comparison where you have a reference. So those are the only ones that are really going to help you in some way. And even then, you're still not going to get an exact reference because of the fact that it's not your gear. It's just not going to be the same. Rarely, if ever, are you going to get what you hear out of a demo somewhere into your guitar. The point on this being, I'm getting ready to do this songwriting and production series that I've been talking about for you guys. And I've been taking the pickups out of my guitars and out of my basses and swapping them around constantly, finding what pickup matches what instrument. I can take the same pickups and put them into a different bass, even one from the same maker, same materials, everything, and it sounds different. So I have to take different series and different models and match them to the characteristics of that bass. If I have one that's a little darker, I need to use the one that's maybe the ceramic magnet that's tuned really bright. If I've got one that's kind of scooped and missing center mids, then I need to put the one with the Alnico magnet in it. That's a little bit more throaty and can bring some of that back. I've had the funny thing of doing an experiment this week that I was going over guitar tones with the engineer I generally work with, and in the same guitar, 3 different sets of pickups sounded radically different from each other. But when I learned their characteristics and I put them into guitars that compensated for those frequencies, those 3 different pickups in 3 different guitars, we almost couldn't tell the guitars apart from each other because I took the dark one and put it in a bright guitar. I took the bright one and put it in a more mid and darker tone guitar. And by the end of it, I had 3 guitars that were almost identical. And in a mix, you would never be able to tell which was which. So that's the process you're going to have to go through with some of this, is understanding your instrument and how to analyze these demos. Now, that's why not having a point of reference makes most of these demos irrelevant. You have one guy showing it off, and basically it's going to be, I can dial in this tone with this guitar, with the way I play. Sure, if you duplicate all of it, you can probably, get pretty close. But, and, sometimes you can get a sense of like, oh, okay, this is an overall good sound. I kind of like the direction of it. But really tuning it to your sound and really getting it narrowed down, it's just not going to do it. I even had, when I first started the channel a long while back, and then I took a hiatus for a while, wasn't sure I was going to be able to dedicate the time to it, I did some single guitar and single bass pickup things, and people still reference them. And while I feel that they're decent and I leave them up, later on I really kind of came to terms with that understanding of I wasn't doing that good of a job because they weren't comparisons. Later on, when I started doing things, even if I was showing off an instrument, I would show off what it was capable of and what options were there. But I don't always look at it as being a fantastic version of, what the tone is going to be once you get it, because even that your bass might be different sounding from the one I got, even though they're same series. This is one thing that I'm going to have to toss back to the audience too, is that this is a rock and metal channel. So I always lean sounds towards a rock and metal context, because one of the reasons I started the channel is we don't get a lot of this. Every time I would start hunting for gear or looking for demos and comparisons, the stuff would be, a lot of slap stuff. You would get a lot of jazz and fusion, not putting any of that down, but that's what would generally be the demos you got. Rarely did I hear, how does this sound really compressed? How does this sound with a lot of gain or a really drive or overdriven tube amp? I didn't get that stuff. I got very sterile versions of things, and I would buy with my best guess. And a lot of times I was disappointed, because when I really slammed it and tried to get an aggressive sound, it just fell flat and I wasn't getting those, type of sounds. A lot of times when I would do these demos, or when I do pick up demos, I get guys that come in and go, well, you shouldn't use that preamp, or you shouldn't, how about just doing it DI or something? And here's my response to that is, unless you're playing exactly my bass with my strings and my setup and my sound, it's not going to sound like that for you anyway. Nobody goes on these guitar channels and goes, well, why don't you switch to this brand of amp, or why don't you give us a direct? Because nobody plays that way. I'm leaning things towards a rock and metal audience. And there are millions of demos all over, so maybe they aren't for you. But here's the fundamental thing of why these demos, even if I use aggressive tones in them, should still be useful to you, even if you're a jazz or a fusion artist. I'm going to be doing comparisons in every pickup demo I do. I'll always have a reference point, at least to something that's more standard. Like an upcoming EMG video I'm going to have their original P sound and then all the rest in the series. So if you know the EMG tone, you'll get, to understand how the others sound in their color against it. I'm not going to, just single pick up things anymore, because I just don't feel it's that useful, unless I'm just showing off an instrument overall and going, there's a quality of tone here. But when guys would complain about that, I always thought it was kind of amusing, because I'm going, I can't duplicate your tone no matter what I do. So getting upset that I'm playing it with my sound and showing it off seems kind of ridiculous, because, maybe you're not going to have as aggressive a tone as I do or something, but at the same time, unless I'm playing your bass with your hands, with my hand in the exact same plucking position as you do, with the same action, with the same strings, into the same preamp, it's not going to sound that way anyway. What you need are reference points. The actual sound that's being delivered most of the time isn't that useful to you, because you can't replicate it. So, to prove this point, let's do an experiment. Okay, so what I have here are two basses, and both of them have the identical pickup set in them. Yeah, I have an EMG PX, EMG PX. Both of these are the same pickup model, front and rear. Behind me is a Schecter Riot bass, identical setup. P in the front, P in the rear. Both are X series. Both of them are tuned exactly the same. And both of them are using the same gauge, same brand strings. So they should be absolutely identical in tone. Let's see the difference. So we have two basses, again, same strings, same type of setup, exact same pickup selection. They sound different from each other, and not by just a little bit. So I did something else on purpose to one, dispel a myth and also make a point about these differences. You can see how different that just that tone is, even though everything should be identical with them. Now, the other thing that should make this even more of an issue is both of these are active sets. And what's the myth we always hear about on the web is, especially about things like EMGs or something, is, oh, well, with these active pickups, they always sound the same. You can put them in any instrument and you're always going to get the same sound. Very obviously, that's crap. So we just had two active sets, identical in the same bass, in different basses, definitely wasn't the exact same sound. It varied very much by the composition of the instrument and its tone woods and everything else. So not only does it dispel the active myth, so if you think, oh, I heard an EMG 81, of course that's the same sound I'm going to get. Not true. And also that if there's that much of a difference with active pickups in between two instruments, a passive set, which relies even more on the instrument, think about the difference that's probably going to go on between that and the instrument you play. Not going to happen. It's not going to sound anywhere near or even in the ballpark of what you can probably expect to get on your end. You can use, again, some of these things as a general guide. If you hear it's a pretty good sound and go, oh, okay, here's maybe my direction. I like what I'm hearing in this one demo, so I'll pursue that. But beyond that, you need to go and find comparisons. And until you do, you don't really know what you're going to get. So I wouldn't say go and spend your money on something until you can get good comparison demos. I do like the fact that a lot of guys now are starting to do pickup shootouts, where they'll compare one to the other or back and forth. The other funny thing is here's the way you save money is by hearing these demos and hearing the back and forth. A lot of times you can hear that the hot new pickup, whatever it is, just isn't that different. I've been really shocked about people's need for the new thing. And I'm sure we've all seen it. Something new comes on the market and everybody just goes, oh my God, it's the Holy Grail. It's so great. And then 6 months later, all the for sale ads on Craigslist and Reverb and everything are full of these pickups. And it's just because it was the flavor of the week. Everybody jumped on it because they had a good marketing thing, or it was just considered cool to like that brand. I can think of one that's going on right now that's, the big guitar brand right now, hot with metal. And a number of demos are starting to come out with its so-called competitor. I'm sure you'll figure it out pretty easily. And not only does the old one that was supposed to be, oh, we've moved on from that, seem to now suddenly be, well, in some cases, the older one sounds better. But in a lot of cases, the new hotness, which is much more expensive, sounds barely different in the same instrument. So buyer beware on that. Don't buy into marketing hype or whatever's new. I'm usually really suspicious of something, whether it be a bass or gear or amps or whatever it is, when it becomes trendy. Because people they like to be part of a group and they like to follow and be part of something. And usually it means in 6 months, you're going to be back out on the market looking for stuff and taking a massive cut on what you paid on those pickups because now you're trying to dump them to all the other people who were dumping them too. So go for the comparisons, always look for shootouts, and try and find something, not just a comparison that, oh, it's this versus this and this one came out ahead, but something where there's a reference that you are familiar with, a pickup that at least you know its characteristics and how it sounds in your guitar. This will save you a ton of time, a ton of money, and until you get those comparisons done, don't rush out and just buy a ton of them. To let you know, and why I can give you this advice with authority, I was looking through my old docs and stuff about when I've done pickup demos or references before going into recordings or doing video demos, or when, like with Schecter, I did all the original custom shop pickup demos and everything. I have records of having tested over 143 pickups. Yeah, 143. And I'm just sick enough that I can probably rattle off the top of my head most of the characteristics of each one pretty accurately. I've got issues, definitely. But at that point, I also started realizing that a lot of them I could get my sound out of. If, it may not be absolutely flawless, but I knew and started to understand how to manipulate the sound. And that's the last and final piece of advice. If you really, really want to cut down this crap and get to your sound, start working with what you have and understanding it and going, no piece of gear is so far away that you can't get 90% of your sound. Don't buy it with these cork sniffers that are going to sit here and tell you, oh, well, it's only if you have this one magic wand of a pickup or something that finally gives you this Nirvana Holy Grail. No, it means they can't dial in their sound. And they're window shoppers. They'd rather do this than have to sit and actually practice and work on their own sound. You can get there. Figure it out and get as close as possible with what you have. And then it makes these decisions less and less important. Then it's just, the cream on top when you get a really great piece of gear. And odds are you aren't going to go through 50 of them. Don't feel like, and this is a big mistake I see a lot of players make, they'll take out one set of pickups and go, okay, I got the great new one. This is going to be amazing. They pop it in, they don't change anything, and they sit and play it and go, oh, that's garbage. Well, you didn't try and tune your sound to those new pickups. They expect with whatever preset they made with the old pickup to suddenly just work with this one, and it's going to magically shine through all that stuff. You have to work with the gear to get that final tone. It's not just going to suddenly come out. And I see this one all the time too. Check me on this one. Go and look at the comments and so many of these pickup things where somebody goes, new guitar day or new pickup day, and I just got these in, I'm going to check them out. They put them in, they goes, oh, those are garbage. Those are horrible. If this is really the case, then explain one thing to me. How is it we have tens or hundreds of thousands of players all over these demos, even famous musicians and guys whose albums we're all getting, who are using pickups that so many of these comment sections people say are garbage, and they're cutting incredible sounds with them? How is that? There are pickups I absolutely hate that I've heard people get good sounds, not my sound, but they've gotten good sounds. I can't work with them because it's just not how I engineer my stuff. So, it really comes down to you've got to work with it, and it's just a flavor that is either more or less difficult for you to work with. And it may get to your tone quicker or slower, but some require more time, some require less. At the end of the day, learn how to manipulate sound, and you're going to get there a lot faster, and that Holy Grail pickup will become something that probably surprises you. You may run onto something you're like, oh my God, this is completely cheap and nobody cares about it. Or it's the one in all the forums that's the old news, or everybody just craps all over it, and it turned out to be, the gold mine for you. That's happened to me a number of times, as we've talked about on past Metal Base Mondays, where I've talked about cheap gear from the past that everybody says is passé, and I've used it and got tones that all the guys with the $5,000 rigs are going, how did you get that sound? Well, I got it with a $200 unit that you said was a piece of garbage because I knew how to dial it in. It's no different with the pickups. All a pickup does is add to some color and amplify what you do and what your bass puts out. Think of it that way, and you're likely to get much better results, spend less money, waste less time. Learn to dial it in, you'll be a lot happier. In the comments below, let me know, has a piece of gear really freaked you out in that it either was horrible when you saw demos and you thought it was going to be great, and it just did not at all deliver what it promised? Or was there something where you thought, oh, I got to rip these pickups out, they're going to be garbage, or a piece of gear that you bought cheap that really turned out to be the secret sauce that you thought you were going to have to spend a ton of money on, and it just delivered for you, and most people would have just walked away from it? I love to hear that type of stuff. I've got a ton of things like that. So that's going to do it for this Metal Base Monday. Some new interviews coming up. Some really interesting stuff coming in to start beginning with the production series, and I might even have a celebrity guest. We'll keep that under wraps. But make sure you subscribe, hit that bell, hit the alerts, all that, so you don't miss the other stuff and other series coming up. And that's going to wrap it up for the Pickup Edition. Thanks as always. I really appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you next time.